Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be doing another unsolved mysteries video. It has been a hot minute since I have done one of these, and before we get into it I just want to mention that these are not called Mystery Mondays anymore. These are not going up on a certain day, a certain time. They're just going up when they go up, when I've got one. Once I finish researching, that's when I'm going to upload it. I'm not going to put like a time or a day on it. It's just when it happens, it happens. So now that that is out of the way, let's just go ahead and get into today's case. So today we're going to be talking about the Tan family murders, and honestly this is one of the most frustrating cases that I have ever looked into in my life. It just makes me want to rip my hair out because it's like, I know that you should be in jail but no one's doing anything about it, and it's also like, why did you do it? So let's just get into it. On January the 6th in 1979, all 4 children from the Tan family were brutally murdered in their apartment. Their father, Tan Quen Chai, who was 38, and their mother, Lee Mei Young, who was 30, lived in a 1-bedroom housing and development apartment, which was on the 4th floor of the 58th block of, I don't think I'm going to pronounce this right, Geylang Bahru in Singapore. They lived there with their 4 children, and although it was small, they managed to make it work as best they could, and they tried to provide as best they could for their children because they were so attached to them. It's like their whole lives just revolved around their children. They were obsessed with them. Their small apartment had photos of them just everywhere. Their youngest child and only daughter, Tan Chin Ni, was 5 years old and was attending kindergarten. Their 3 boys, Kok Peng, who was 10 years old, Kok Hing, who was 8 years old, and Kok Sun, who was 6 years old, were all attending Bandamere Primary School. At 6:35 a.m. on the 6th of January, so the day of the murders, Quen and Lee left for work like any normal day while their children were sleeping. They owned a minivan, so to make ends meet as their job, they shuttled children to and from school with the minivan. At around 7:10, Lee Mei called the children to wake them up so that they could get ready for school, but there was no answer, so she called another 2 times and still no answer. So she ended up calling a neighbor and was like, can you please go and wake the children up, or just try and knock at the door, get them awake so that they can get ready for school. And the neighbor did. They went and they knocked, but just like on the phone calls, there was no response. At 10 a.m. that morning, Lee and Quen got home from work, and that is when Lee unfortunately discovered the horrific sight of her children who had been murdered in their bathroom of their apartment. The bodies of the children were all fully clothed with pants and shirts on, and they were piled on top of each other. They had been hacked and slashed to death. It was honestly a brutal crime scene, and there was no less than 20 slashes on each of their bodies. It did seem like Kok Peng had a struggle with the murderer. His hand was clenched with long hairs still stuck in his fist, and his arm had been almost completely severed. I actually couldn't find anything about the hairs that they found in his hands, so either they tested them and they didn't find anything and didn't find a DNA match, or they didn't test them. The apartment was spotless. There was not a trace of blood in the apartment except for in the kitchen sink. Nothing had been unturned. There was no signs of forced entry either. So it's almost as if nothing ever happened, but then you go into the bathroom and there's this horrible scene of 4 murdered children. So because there was no signs of forced entry, police were convinced that this was someone close to the family, because how else would they get in? They also believed that it was a premeditated murder because it was immaculately cleaned, not a drop of blood except for that was in the kitchen, which, considering how brutally they had been murdered, slashed, is pretty insane. So obviously it had to be someone who knew them very well or was close to the family, and it took the time either to clean up or they knew exactly what they were doing. And I don't want to bring light to this situation at all because it is disgusting, but I kind of think of it as like a Dexter situation that could have happened almost. Like they knew what they were doing, they knew how not to make mess, or they knew exactly how to clean it up. They had thought this out. There's no way they just went in there and then somehow magically made the entire place spotless. No way. They obviously knew what they were doing. They had the products to do it, and they did it. However they did it, they must have been pretty meticulous to completely erase any trace of themselves. Also, the fact that these murders took place so soon after the parents had left clearly means this person knew when they could get in by and when they had to get out by. I mean, there was such a small time frame in which they could have happened. 6:35 a.m. the parents left, and then 7:10 a.m. they called and there was no answer. So obviously between this time frame, the murders had already occurred, or the murders were like happening while these phone calls were being made. That's such a short time frame. This person knew that the parents weren't going to be home, and it seems like they knew that the children were going to be alone. Not to mention, the children either knew this person well enough to let them in, or they had some other means of getting in. And if they did have another way to get into their apartment without any signs of forced entry, it just further proves that this was premeditated. Lee May actually lost her keys to the apartment around the time of the murders, so either she lost them and this person found them somehow, or she lost them on purpose. I don't know how else to put it, but she didn't actually lose them. This person managed to get them from her. And the murder weapons were reportedly taken from the kitchen of the apartment, which, I mean, if you're going to premeditate a murder, why would you not bring your own weapons? But a knife and a chopper were missing and they have never been recovered. When it came to the investigations, the Criminal Investigations Department, or the CDI, took over this case and investigated. Lee May's brother actually mentioned to the media that this murder could be in relation to an illegal tontine scheme that Lee and Quinn might have been engaged in. And a tontine scheme is basically just like a scheme where a bunch of individuals put in a bunch of money, or like monetary assets, into this pool, and they kind of get like shares from it over a period of time, but whoever dies last that is in this group of individuals gets to keep everything that was put into it. But this didn't end up leading investigators anywhere. There wasn't any leads on this. It was just kind of, he said it was out there, but there was no evidence to prove it. There was no anything really after that. And not to mention, it wouldn't really make sense, because why would you kill the children? It just doesn't make any sense. They're not in the tontine scheme. They probably didn't even know that their parents were doing it if their parents were doing it. It just doesn't make any sense at all to kill the children. The Tans also told the media that they had no idea who would do this. They had no enemies, and they can't think of anyone that they could have upset or offended, especially to the point of having their children murdered. 2 weeks later, there were no new leads into this case, and the Tans received a letter. This was a Chinese New Year letter written in Mandarin, and it was signed off by the murderer. Now, this letter said two things that would indicate that this is someone that the Tans know very well, as already suspected. So firstly, it referred to both of them by their nicknames, and the second thing it said was that now you can have no more offspring, because Lee actually had a fertility operation, or a sterilization surgery, following the birth of their daughter. And honestly, this isn't something that you go around just telling everyone. This has to have been someone they know, someone who knew them well enough that they felt they could confide in this person about this surgery. The note actually didn't bring any new leads though. It just kind of solidified the fact that they were looking for someone that the family knew very well. The CID questioned over 100 suspects, and the most unfortunate part of this, I would say, is there is a woman, one of their neighbors, who was like 65 or something, I think, and she just always sits in the corridor of the apartments watching the children play, and she would have seen on any normal day who would have gone in and out of the apartment. But on that specific day, she was not there. She was inside her own apartment washing her hair. So the one day she's not there, this happens. There were a few suspects that were big enough to make headlines in Singapore, but none of them resulted in anything. A few of them were hoaxes. There was one guy who told the CID that there was a bloodied couple seen leaving the apartment building, but as I said, this turned out to be a hoax. There was one good lead though from a taxi driver. He was from Taopeo, I believe it's pronounced, and he told the CID that he picked up a man in his 20s with a lurch who was really sketchy looking. The whole left side of him had like blood droplets all over it, and he had a knife, which he noticed because when he got out of the car, the knife banged against the door. He picked up the man at about 8 a.m. on block 96 on Kalang Baru Road. I can't pronounce anything, and he dropped him off at Lavender Street. And the place that he picked him up from, I should mention, was right near the murder scene. The authorities obviously told the parents, and they seemed to know immediately who this guy was, and they referred to him by uncle. Quen said that this man was their neighbor and he saw them pretty much every single day because he would come in to use their phone. They ended up putting this guy uncle in a lineup, and the taxi driver picked him out straight away. They immediately afterwards detained him, but then 2 weeks later they released him because of a lack of evidence. This is the part that I was talking about that is so incredibly frustrating, because it's like so obvious that it is this guy. He was picked out of a lineup. They knew exactly who he was. He comes over every day, so of course the children are going to answer the door for him. It's just like, like it's so obvious that it was him, and I just can't believe that he was let out. And not to mention the time that he was detained, 2 weeks. So after that 2 weeks when he was let out, that's when the Tan family received that Chinese New Year letter. So it like lines up perfectly for him to get out, send them this letter, but lack of evidence, and then him and his sister moved away and never been heard from since. There was a theory that maybe Lee was having an affair with uncle, and that is why he knew all of these things, like when they would be gone, when they would be getting back, and the fact that she wasn't fertile, because if you are sleeping with someone, that is probably something she would mention, that she had this fertility surgery, or sterilization surgery, sorry. It would also make sense, considering he is their neighbor, that he would have known that the woman that normally sits in the corridor was not there, because I mean, what a coincidence that the one day she's not there, the murders occur. I think that is very sketchy and not just a coincidence. So maybe Lee decided that it wasn't risking her marriage over this affair, and so she ended things, and then uncle lashed out and decided to kill all 4 of the children, which is completely excessive, but also a definite possibility. From what I've read, Quen and Lee were just like completely in love and just for each other, you know, like for each other, and it doesn't really make sense that she was having an affair, but I guess you never know. On January 7, the children were buried side by side with their favorite books and their favorite toys, which not all of them, because Lee and Quen did save a few in memory of their children, and it was just devastatingly hard for them. Lee actually had trouble staying conscious because she was that upset at the funeral. Both parents stopped working, dropping children off in their minivan, because it would just be too hard for them. It would be like a constant reminder, seeing these happy children going to school and remembering that yours were not there anymore. So I completely understand why they stopped, although they did live in the same apartment, and they both ended up, after they quit, went and worked for a plastic machine company. And while this case is so incredibly sad and so incredibly heartbreaking, it does have kind of a happy ending. So Lee was looking into this reverse sterilization surgery, which kind of seemed far-fetched, right? Because I've never heard of that, but by some miracle it worked, and on December 30th, 1983, they conceived a beautiful little baby boy. And that is it. That is the end of this case. I would love to know what you guys think. I definitely 100 without a doubt in my mind think that this uncle guy was guilty, and it just frustrates me to no end that we don't know the motive, and the fact that he moved away and that was it. He's fine living his life after he probably murdered 4 innocent children. But that's the shitty thing about these stories. So I really hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you do want to see more Unsolved Mysteries videos, and subscribe to my channel so you do get notified when I upload them, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Bye!